welcome. I'm DJ Sonics, and today I'll be showing you how to do a basic master in Pro Tools with only the stock plugins. Now, if you're trying to master your music for the purpose of sales or commercial use in any way, I'd really recommend using Apollomusic's mastering service. This way you really get an industry professional sound, high quality, and loudness. So let's open up Pro Tools here. Also, check out the link below in the description. It'll bring you straight to Apollomusic's mastering page where you can instantly upload your songs for professional mastering. Use code SUBSCRIBE during checkout to save even more on Apollomusic's low prices. So let's create a session here. Let's make sure our session parameters are correct. Today I'll be showing you how to master a song. 44.1 kHz, 24-bit. I believe this is all good. Now let's start it. Let's name this master demo. I'll save it to the desktop. Okay, now let's import the audio file or song that we have. I believe this is in MP3s and audios on my desktop. Alright, let's master some instrumental I made. Let's do this one here. Now you can see here that I use shortcuts or key commands. This will not only save you time, but make you more efficient in Pro Tools, Logic, or whichever other DAW you use. If you need to learn these key commands, I really recommend going into the menu, figuring it out, and looking at the actual key command next to whichever function you're using. Okay, we'll import our audio into the clip list for now. And here we'll create an audio track. Let's do a stereo audio track and a stereo master track. Again, I'm using key commands here. Drag it in. Let's drag this into our stereo audio track. Yep. Rename it. So the first thing I really like to do while mastering is really analyze the waveform of our audio or music, whatever we have here. And so far it looks like it's really compressed, or it has some sort of limiter on it. The dynamic range is all pretty close other than the intro or outro. This typically means that we don't want to add too much more compression or limitation on it, as that will only compromise the sound. It already has a lot of compression or little too dynamic range here. And that's just really looking at the waveform here. Haven't even listened to it yet, but essentially it also depends on what type of song it is. If it's an EDM or house music, then obviously you'd want it to be blasting out pretty loud. So the next step here we'll take is we'll actually find out the peak level here. So we can do this either two ways. We can listen to it or we can use one of the plugins. But I'd much prefer to listen to it, figure out for myself what it actually is. So if we look at the faders here, we'll see where it's peaking, and actually we'll go into the mix review here in a second and figure out what number the decibel is and figure out how high it's peaking. Looks like we don't have too much headroom here. In fact, we're peaking at negative 0.1, which is actually not good at all, so we'll have to make some headroom. We'll select a plugin that's stock with Pro Tools, EQ 7-band. So here we go to the input. Let's give ourselves, since it's at negative 0.1 right now, we'll need a lot more headroom than that. Let's go to about negative 5 or so. Give us some headroom there. Next thing we want to do is go bring some of that low bass down at negative 20 hertz, around there or so. So we'll use a high pass filter to do this. And we'll get rid of that unnecessary low bass rumble down there at the 20 hertz range. We can't really hear down there anyways. Now it seems like I've mixed this instrumental heavy bass, so let's reduce some bass down here. Let's go about to 160, sounds like it is at. Oh, we don't want to reduce it that much, so let's go ahead and take this and make it sharper. Okay, cool. We can in fact make this a little bit brighter too. This instrumental sounds kind of low bassy. EQ wise, it's pretty good, so typically when you're mastering a song, you don't want to EQ it too much. If you find yourself EQing too much, then you should more than likely go back and remix the song. So next we want to do is add a little compression. The song has already a lot of compression in it, so again we're just using stock plugins for Pro Tools. So let's set the threshold until we find gain reduction at about -1 or -2 around there decibels. Now the reason we're doing this is because we want the sounds that are lower than the peak to actually match the peak loudness. This way all sounds, including instruments and vocals, are all coherent, all while preserving some dynamics, unless of course this is an EDM song, in which case dynamic range doesn't actually exist. Now what I typically like to do with the knee setting is set it pretty low. This actually compresses the signal as it reaches the threshold, gives it a smoother sound. Now I also like to add some makeup gain to compensate for our gain reduction. Now we're going to add a second stage of compression. We'll set this compressor to target the peaks of the song, allowing us to add even more makeup gain. Here we'll want to apply 3 decibels of gain reduction to the peak of the song. Now you'll typically find that the strongest peak in the song has a strong attack and little sustain. Depending on the song you're mastering, you'll want to adjust your attack and release accordingly. You'll find here that I'll be using a fairly quick attack, which means that as soon as the compressor finds the peak, it'll start compressing it right away. In case you're not already aware, the input and output knobs are slightly different than the last compressor we used. The input knob actually controls the input level and how much gain reduction we'll be applying to the input signal. Now the output is essentially just the output gain, how much gain it applies to the signal, and how loud it'll be. The next step we want to take is the limiter. And in fact, we'll actually be applying some stereo enhancement right before that insert. So we'll leave a space for the stereo enhancement as well. Our threshold will be set to -0.1. This way our music can be as loud as possible without distorting at all. So let's find a stock plugin that does stereo enhancement. Air stereo width is fine. Now let's adjust the width setting. This will basically give our song a lot more width and stereo enhancement. Now you can actually control each bandwidth, the low bandwidth, mid bandwidth, and high bandwidth. This allows you to control the stereo placement of the low, highs, or mids. Depending on your song, I really recommend listening for what sounds the best and adjusting it accordingly. Now let's go back to our limiter and figure out where we're peaking and how loud our song currently is. So it seems that we're peaking at -6 right now. Because we're peaking at about -6, we'll apply 6 decibels of gain. This way we can get our peak up to -0.1. We won't be clipping. Our threshold will automatically limit it and prevent it from clipping. Here you have to be careful to not over compress it, however. This will give it a really unnatural sound. Now we can see that we're peaking about -0.1. Depending upon the type of song you're mastering, you'll want to adjust the gain accordingly. If you're mastering an EDM song, then more than likely you want a brick wall, everything at -0.1, little to no dynamic range, so it really depends on what type of song you're mastering. And that's how you do a basic mastering. Now I wouldn't depend on this for commercial purposes or releasing albums or anything. I'd really recommend using a professional mastering service like Apollomuzik. We can definitely do that for you. So thank you, we'll be making some more videos, and subscribe.